Okay, in object oriented procedures for an object to see, so it is like similar to other object oriented languages. So we're going to learn about classes and objects and data abstraction and encapsulation, inheritance procedures, polymorphism, message passing, and dynamic binding. These are the basic features of any object oriented procedures. So we'll see what is class and how these objective C procedures helps for any programming language. So basic objective behind the object oriented procedures is to give more time to analyze the product, or to give more time to analyze the idea before to code it. So these are the basic principles we usually follow for every application when we are developing with object oriented programming languages. So coming to the first feature of it is classes. So class in objective C, we talk about everything in terms of class and objects. When we have any idea, so let me give you some description. So as many of them are from different object oriented backgrounds, but we'll go with a basic explanation. So classes is like if we take any example of making one application, like one user interface application. So in that scenarios, we're going to define one customer or else one user. First, we need to define what are the basic mandatory required fields are for the user. So if I want to say one particular person, if I want to give as a credentials, let's say for example Gmail kind of application. So we'll talk about first we have to create one user interface like a login page. In that scenarios, first we will think about what is the basic structure for a user. We'll create a one basic structure. In C language terms, we'll say like the structures are there. It is similar what we have seen in C languages to create any structures like to. So if I say user, so I want to give one user interface for user registration or else user login. So if I say like we'll go with login. So what will be our plan? So the design we need to we think in terms of what is the basic structure for a user creation. So we'll create one different model diagrams. So this diagram will contains the details. So if I say user, the user needs to be login. So when the user login, will have two things like username. First he has to enter a username and later he has to enter a password. So these are the basic details we need to accept from the user. This is the idea behind to create any user. So later I need to validate the credentials or user details. So now if I want to design one user login kind of page, first I will think about in terms of structure. I won't think about how to code it. First I will think about structure, what is required and what I want to do the details. So I need an information from the user to allow to enter a username, to allow to enter a password. Later I need to manipulate the data, or else I have to validate the data which is passed by the user. If you see go for a Gmail application, we'll click on login button. So later we need to check whether the username is existed or not, whether the password is existed or not. These both are related to the same user or not. So those kind of things we'll do in a validation. So validation will comes with a fail or success case. If there is a success case, we'll give another page presentation. If it is a fail case, we'll give some message orientation, one message. So this is the basic structure we have in our mind before go for any, like before to develop this user login page. So here if you see, we entered three fields. One is like username and password, and one is this is action we want on based on the data. So if we divide into these things, this we will call like actions, The basic information, we call it like username or password. We call it like a properties. So if you see, we defined a class like a login with the basic properties and an action. So in terms of programming language, we call these actions are like a methods. This we will call it like a method. I mean, the method is nothing but in C language we call it a function. So this is the action will represent in terms of functions. Actions are nothing but functions. So properties are nothing but variables or constants or objects. Can be anything which stores some data. That's it. In terms of which can capture some memory and which can hold some information. So this is my basic structure. This way I call it like a login class. I call this as like a user login class. If I say my class name will be user login. So my user login class will have two like a properties and actions. So this is a basic structure. If I say class, what it is giving, like it is giving a description about how the user login should be, what it is taking, and what we doing that with those details. So it is giving like one kind of if we say in technology wise, we'll call it like a class or like a one blueprint. It gives a print like what's the information is needed. It's structurized with information, what we need to capture and what we have to do. But we have not given any implementation for it. Just we planned it. It is like a plan, one planned diagram. We'll say like a class. It's like one kind of a planned entity, but there is no implementation at. So this we have to give one internal details like which capture the information in a real-time way, which works like how you need the behavior. It's do the same action. What the action you want, what's the behavior you want. So you need to perform in a real time with your compilers or interpreters, whatever the environment you have. So that will be done with objects, but only the plan and the structure design will be done with your classes. This is like your class. So here in Objective C, in C language we define this as like a structure, but in structures we don't have a methods. We have only variable declarations that we have to create based on a structure variable. If there are 100 users, we'll create 100 users with some structure variable names. Each user will have one different name, so that will be your structure name. In C it is a structure, but whereas I'm coming to Objective C, in Objective C, classes has been class is a combination of .h and .m, combination of two files. Here a file which prefix like which it's like suffixed with .h, we'll call it like a header file, class header file. This we call it like a implementation file. The two, one is header file and one is implementation file. So it's a combination of two files, one is .h and one is .m. In C language we define all the things in one .c file, where we have seen an stdio.h, some kind of header files, so which describes only the declarations of variable something. So here in Objective-C they're structured in different way. All the headers should go in one file, all the implementation should be there in one file. They separated, so which gives a clear identity to the developer where the declared variables are methods where is the declaration, where is the implementation. So here in Objective-C, every programming language is having certain keywords. So keywords, the term itself will define. There are some certain English words which makes one key identification in the programming language. So when it's compiled or interpreted. So here and similarly in C language, if I want to define a structure, I use a keyword struct, which indicates the compiler and saying that the user is declared one struct. So it uses that struct English word as like a structure. Here similarly, if I want to define, there are different keywords which used with a directive symbol. At the rate will call it like a directive symbol. Interface, this is a keyword. The keywords which used to define a class in Objective-C, it starts with .h and ends with .n. These two keywords will be used in .h file, and the keywords for .m, we used a directive call at the rate implementation at the rate end. They are the two keywords. These two keywords will be used in .m file. So here we can see there are like four keywords: at the rate interface, at the rate end, at the rate implementation, at the rate end. There are the three keywords. These keywords will be used to define one class file in Objective-C. So it splits. This is one declaration, and as I said, what is class in technical terms? The class is like a blueprint for an entity, and class provides a design for an entity development. So when we define any application development, the class we use to make a design. And if I take an example of a bike, first I will structure the bike in a class, and later we'll plan how to make that class, what are the properties or actions are required. So here I given an example for, instead of bike, I given an example for user login. What structure it follows and all. And as I said, its class is a combination of data members and member functions. These data members will like a variables or objects or constants which declared in .h file, and the member functions are nothing but actions or methods. The combination of these two will call it like a class. The member functions are nothing but methods, and data members are nothing but variables or objects which declared in classes. Then class .h, we can say like it's a class.h file. In Objective-C, class is contain two files. One is .h file and other one is .m file. .h file contains only data members and member function declarations. So we should understand here, it's like all data members will have only declaration. You cannot initialize anything at there. I declare int a, so I want to give some value, so you can't give any value to there. In .h file we use only declaration. And when coming to .m, what are the data is defined or declared in .h file that got implemented, that will have implementation in .m. So if you want to initialize, or if you want to manipulate, or if you want to perform any action, or if you want to do some operations on it, so you can do the data operations in .m file which have a declaration in .h file. So if I go for, as I said, there are the keywords.
I have a question here.
Hello.
Yeah, I have a question here.
Yeah, tell me.
So, see, in C, .h file, the header file is not mandatory. You
Okay.
can code it in a way that where you can put the declarations and the variables you can define at the top of the program. There does not have to be a header file mandatory, but in Objective C, is it mandatory?
Here in .h, like we test cases, here we declare .h and .m, the combination for define any of the class. So when we write any test cases, we define .m. So there we can in .m also we do like declarations like extension that I will tell you how exactly we can utilize the .m for both. But usually for every class is a combination of .h and .m. So that is a basic structure with its Objective C is following.
So .h file is mandatory.
Yes, for one class, the .h file is mandatory to have a declarations. So still we can
Okay.
extend it, the declaration part that we can do in .m. Means like you can define a class in .m file as well. So with giving the same declarations of a .h, whatever we want to write, and still we can do that extensions. That concept
Okay.
we'll call it in a different words. We have a different concepts in Objective C. So we can understand how exactly we can utilize the .m for declarations as well. But the basic
Okay.
behavior is goes with .h and .m.
Thanks.
So whereas in .h file, how it looks. So as I said, the directive is @interface, and we'll write a class name. And object-oriented procedures, it follows inheritance. So as of now, just will remind there is a super class we have to inherit when we create any of the class, because here we're creating one class. First, the class should follow some basic principles. So it is having one superclass relation in Objective C. Inbuilt, there is a one class we'll use that is called NS object. So this is a base class for all the classes in Objective C. So whenever we create any new class, first we needs to give a basic information for that class to get registered, and we need to give some basic information to be recognized and to be have some identification from the compilation level. So we inherit one class called NS object. So there is a super class for all the classes in Objective C. So we'll follow @interface and followed by the class name and inherits with the one super class name. So if you have data members, if you want to define some data members, it's mandated to go with block and define data members inside the block. So block should be opened and it should be closed. And after that, out of the block, you need to define your all functions. You cannot bind all the functions and data members within single block. Since it is a .h declaration file, you need to make a separate. The data members are separate and member functions are separate. So we'll define all the functions. And you need to make sure to give a message or to identified with @and keyword. So this keyword will indicates the compiler by saying that the class declaration is ended. If you want to use one .h file to define multiple classes, you can define it. But you need to specify the declaration and the end part for that specific class name which we are creating. For example, so if I say there is a demo like for a bike.h, if I want to define, so define @interface directive followed with the class name and take a superclass help NS object and give the data variables which you want to declare. I'm saying that if there is a bike, the bike should have a gears, it should have some fuel capacity. So I'm defining those two keywords, and there are certain actions for one bike. If I want to describe or structurize one bike, so it should have some design properties, and there is acceleration is required and deacceleration is required, and these two comes with the speed. If I say like the bike should have some speed, what's the speed? And if I want to say there should be some control, so this control and speed is depends on the basic properties which they are in the bike. Just I declared only sample 2 properties, but when it's coming to the reality, there will be more properties with respect to the bike structure. And this is like the basic structure if I go with one class. So all the required data which you want to capture for that specific class will define in the properties. What are the actions you want to apply that comes into your member functions area, and the class.h file got ended with @end, so that the compiler can understand so what we are doing. Are we creating a class? Are we creating something else? So if there is a identifier name which followed with @interface keyword, the compiler will understand that this is a class. And if it is and it will check for @end. So once we declared @interface, is this interface is ended or not? So once you provide the and, then it identifies the interface is ended. Whatever the data is defined in between @interface and @end directive, it capture on based on the structure. So you should follow a structure. It's mandatory to define the data members in block. Then only your compiler can separate the data with respect to the properties blocks and with respect to the action blocks. It can separate your class and it can compile as it is. So when I said like the class will have a .m file as well. So .m file is specified to have an implementation. So implementation will be, so whatever the class I declared, so I want to implement the same class. Give your @implementation and with a space followed with a space, after that give your class name. Before doing this, these two are different files. Bike.h is one file and bike.m is one file. If these two are two different files, then we need to attach bike.h in .m. That I will show you how to attach one .h file to .m file, so that the compiler can bring the data from the .h file and it includes to your .m file. So implementation should followed with @end, so that it can identify the implementation is ended. So if the .h is having some different methods or actions which declared, you can implement it, and whatever the properties you defined in .h, that we will give some initializations. We can do some data manipulations or actions in .m file, but you cannot initialize any data values directly in .h, because if I want to give the same value here, so this is not a proper way to give any data variables. It won't take if you do any initialization in .h file. It throws some errors. It is the way to give some values or initialization for your data members in .m file. This is the way of creating one class in Objective-C. But when if you want to create a multiple .h declarations in one file, that you can do it. The basic behavior of a .h to have a declarations in one part, so that they classified into two areas. Instead of having all the things in one class to getting confused, make split the two things. Declarations are a separate and implementation as a separate. Keep all declarations at one area, keep all implementations are at one area, so that it will be very clear where is the declarations and implementations. So this is the basic structure of a class declarations and class creation.
So the dash that you have before the void, that's the part of syntax.
Which
That's
one?
a syntax member as a declare function.
Yeah, this is, yeah, I will tell you that what is the method. These are the methods declaration in
Okay.
Objective-C. I will tell you that in detail when we go for methods. This is like the basic understanding how the class looks like, what it has. If you have a Xcode, just open it and go to file and click on new option, click on project. So go with single view application. We have different templates, but I will tell you that. But first of all, we'll go with single view application template. If you have a Xcode, just you can follow with me as well. So it will have some one step of so single view application. Just give your product name, hello world something. You should give your organization name, give some name, and identifier. You can give some name. It generates you one identifier, bundle identifier. This is your unique ID for your application. So identifier itself we can recognize. This is the unique ID for your project. Choose one language, Objective-C, and give the device. Either you want to build for both devices or only for one device. Want to go with universal. So as of now, don't check these checkboxes. The checkboxes will add you some code related to database and related to some test cases, but we'll do that later. And it will ask you where you want to save. Choose one directory in your local system, or else you can create a Git repository as well. So it supports Xcode inbuilt, supports the Git repository where you can store the data in a remote. So I want to save in my local system. So created. So based on the template selection, it generates certain files. You don't need to worry like about the files, how it is generated. Just as of now, initial stage, we created a project. Just we got one structure. If you have Xcode, just you can create it. The Xcode, when I select single template application, single view application, it is generated with two folders. One is same name, whatever I given a project name, it's created one project name based folder, and it created another folder with products. So this folder will have your application. So this is your executable app .app. If you go with your application, it's suffixed with Xcode PROJ. It indicates Xcode project. All your Xcode projects will have an icon like this. This is your Xcode icon. So in products, you can find what's your end product name with .app extension. So your just open your project folder. So your project folder is having certain files, and it's having one more folder. It's called supported files. So these are all default generated based on your template selection. This is my main.m. So it's one of the implementation file. It's the basic .main file. When you run this application, your compiler initially will go execute your main.m file. This is your initial start of your application. It starts, your app will start from the main method. So this application can be executed in both ways. You can directly open one application and create an application from Xcode. You can run from the Xcode, or else you can run one Xcode application from terminal as well. When you run from the terminal, so we'll usually, if you want to pass some arguments, so this is like how you seen the argument passing in Turbo C to C language compilation and running the same approach. But I'm running the application from the Xcode. So first go to your main method. On success of the main method, let's forget about what is this order release pull block and all. So this I will explain you in detail later classes. So this is our main method for the application. So our app is having two phases. One is with user interface, which is visible on your iPhone or mobile point of view, and one is the background services or background data processing. So in order to give one user interface, it is having UI application main. So this is related to Cocoa Touch. So will these we will talk more in detail when we go for the Cocoa Touch related frameworks. So just as of now, keep in mind main.m is our initial file which is going to be executed when you run the application. So there are now we can see two classes got created. Each class is having one .h and one .m. We can see the class name. App delegate is one class and view controller is one class. I said to create a single view controller. So this is a single view based application. So one view controller it is having, one application class it is having. It gives an option by default with one drag and drop file. So this is storyboard. This is the component like where you can drag and drop the elements, graphical elements. We can do drag and drop approach in application development so that we can use like a storyboard. There are two files, storyboard based. There are two storyboard files we have by default. Just as of now, don't focus too much on the storyboards and all. Just focus about our, as per our concept, we are dealing with classes. Let's see what is the class. .h. So the .h, as we said, it is having a @interface is a keyword and followed with the class name, and it inherits one of the superclass. Here the superclass is UI responder. So this app delegate is having one basic feature and the basic usage. Just because of that, it got implemented in this way. So let's create a new class. So then we'll see how a class will created. Right click on your folder and it gives you one drop down, or else go to your file, go to new and select file option. So before that, select the folder, in which folder you want to create this file. So there are the different options like iOS, watchOS or tvOS or OS X. So based on your platform, choose your option. So my platform is iOS. I'm choosing source. So there are different files you can create. If you want to create one Objective-C file, go to source. This is Cocoa Touch class. This is Objective-C file .h and .m. You can create individual files. Let's go with one class. Here you can see the symbol is class. You can create one class file. I want to go with one, as I said, user login. You should give one superclass. Let's go with superclass is NS object. This is the base class for all classes. My class name is user login. In ideal way, use your class name start with a capital letter. Choose your language. Language is Objective-C. Let's see, this is the target in which application you want to add these files. Your one project can have multiple targets. To which target these files belongs to? I'm creating the files class file which belongs to Hello World Demo app. Now you can see when I created one class, I got two files. Keep these two files. Now open the .h. You can see that @interface, the class name followed with the superclass and @end .m. Before that, I needs to attach this .h to .m for the linking. First you have to link it. So we will follow @import. In .h is different, @include. Here we have followed with @import. It imports your class which is required for this specific class. So this .m is having a link with .h file. So what are the data is defined in .h. So those data is available in this .m file. That is the meaning when we do this import. So I'm giving an implementation for this class. Your .h can have multiple classes. For which class you want to give implementation, you should give your class name. So this is my user login class I want to implement. So here we are implementing a class name user login. My implementation is done. So this is the way of when you create, it gives you, this is the basic structure. Now you might have seen your C language. As of now, just go with C. Str username, char str password. We define two, one username, one password. Now I want action. So actions in Objective-C is defined with methods. I'm giving a return type. Return type is void. So this is a similar in C language. What it means by the void, the same meaning. It won't return any value from this method. Validate user login data. You pass some data, you want to validate it. This method is not receiving any arguments. A method with name without return values. We can say an object like C language. So I will tell you that what is the method and all. Copy that same and do the implementation. So this is my username. Else we can do the same validating username before. You can see init. So I have not defined this init, but this is the method which I am overriding from the superclass NS object. Self indicates the current object. I want to get a memory from basic initialization from the superclass. I am checking that. Just return yourself. If you see this method, we are not declared in .h, but still we are able to get the method because it is there in your NS object. This is your superclass. I am taking information from the superclass. I am giving the implementation. This is my method name. I will tell you that how exactly it works, but see. So this is your method name. I deployed it. I am doing something. I will tell you that what I am doing at here exactly. Str username, test, str password, password. Then I want to validate. Same str username. Here, like, let's make true. So if I say like there is a validation, if the values are true, then I'm saying that it's like username is test and password is password. Display something on your console. If it is true, I'm displaying something. So let's see, it's like the basic the way you define something and you are able to initialize it in .m. So if I want to do the same here, you can see the error. You cannot do any declarations here. Let's build it. Go to your product and you can see the option build, or else command plus B. You can use command B to build the application. You can see the progress of status succeeded. So your build got succeeded means there is no compile-time errors. So we are able to create one class. The simple class. For the practice, create one more class. Easiest way to go with sum. And create one value 1, value 2 and do some sum. Here I am defining method with which can accept arguments. They are like same. You feel a complexity with these arguments, you remove it, give some values, some 10, 100. First go with without arguments, without any confusions. This is the method. Just compile. Still no errors. You successfully created one class and define some data and define some action. So our structure is ready. Now you need to perform the structure. So class is done. So now I want to execute the class. So we have another concept in Objective-C called objects. So we'll see what is object. So we define class, that is fine. So now our structure is ready. Now we need to work with this structure. So we have another concept in object oriented features, that is with object. So this structure will be implemented with some different values, will be uniquely identified. When I said user login, the login is related to one specific user. So there should be a existing user, so that then only the user login will be a valid structure. So for that, the user where we can uniquely identify. So here like user 1. So we can identify this user 1. It is one existing real-time entity. Real-time entity in the sense where you can find it in real time. It's not like where it can refer to some real-time data. So user 1, there is one object. So which have the implementation for this structure. The structure is having username and password. The user 1 will have one username and password. Let's say user 1 is having one username, something test, and having one password, like password, is having some data and is having validation. The class is having some validation. So that validation needs to be validated for the user 1. So in that scenario, we can use the user 1 at here. So if you see the another example, when we talk about the class, if there is a structure related to the bike, so we can, when we have a structure for a bike, how it looks, so we'll create one bike object. The bike object can be any model of the bike. So if it is some different bike models, we can say like the names like a pulsar and all the things, we can say each name can be identified as like one real-time object. So all objects will have a same structure, should follow the same structure of the class, like it should have some tires, and it should have some engine, and it should have all the basic structure what the class is having. But the implementation will have a different, that depends on bike to bike. So like we can identify how the object looks like. The basic intention behind this example is to identify what is the difference of a object and class. So class is only the basic structure where the object is having a real data where it can be manipulated, which gives you some different results based on the data. So here, so whatever the class is defining, so object can fill some information to that class, and it can give, it can do some actions with which is defined in the class with the help of object. It gives you different results. So we call this as like a object in real time. So when it coming to this object to C based notation, so we'll call object as an instance of a class, and we call like a one object we can use to refer a class, and in real time we call it like object is a real time entity in a technology terms. When it's coming to the technology terms, what is object, we call it like a instance of a class, we call this as like a real time entity, either or we can say. If you're building a plan, the diagram will call it like a class. If there is any project which you want to create, the structure call it like a class. And when we are doing that, it's like it's another example like taking a building. So if you want to construct a building, first you should have a plan. The plan is nothing but a class what we have. When it's, once the plan is getting constructed, the constructed building we can see in a real time, that we call it like a object. If we want to see in a real time example, we can think about building plan as a diagram, and the real time constructed element we call it like a object. So in object creation, how we can do in object to see, in object to see, in the object creation, so NS object is a superclass which is having some different methods, inbuilt methods, which do, method means we can identify do some action with the data. So it can give you the object creation. There are different methods in NS object class. With the help of those methods, you can create one object. So here object refers to the memory. What are the structure is defined in class. If you see here, this class is having two variables, int value 1, int value 2. You know that the integer can take 2 bytes of memory in this, so it can allocate like the 4 bytes of memory. So it capture, if when you create one variable, it capture the data which is referred in this class in sum and as well as the superclass. It's take the total, the memory which is defined based on your data types. So the total memory will be identified with one variable name. So that variable name will call here as like a class object. So we use a methods like new. So this is a method which allocates some memory, and that memory will be referred by your object name. And there are different methods, new or alloc init. They are the methods. These methods we use to create an object in object to see. So the basic intention, so this is the basic intention, what is object and what is the class, and what is the basic difference between object and class. Before creating an object, as I said, the NS object class is providing different methods. So we'll go with methods. So how to define a method? So in C language, we see the functions. So the functions is how it is defined, like what kind of different ways of creating a function. So here also in Objective-C we have a different ways of creating a function. So here the methods is the same definition what C language is saying. The C language is saying about methods is to collection of statements which refer to do some specific action. If I say the bike is having some speed, the speed is in terms of different statements collection. So it similarly we can define one method with collection of statements. So all the collection of statements can be referred with one name. That name is nothing but a method name. So how you define methods in C language? We can define a methods in C language in 4 ways. So 4 ways we can define a methods in Objective-C. One is method with return type, with arguments, with return type and with arguments. You can create a method. I'm simply saying like, okay, you'll get confused. You can say like without return type, with arguments. With return type, without arguments. The fourth way is without return type and without arguments. Method with return type with arguments, in the sense the method can return a value and receive the values or else we can say parameters. The parameters will call like arguments. So once it processes all the statements, it can return some value. Similarly, here the methods are defined and classified into two levels. In Objective-C, the methods are defined and classified into two levels. Class methods, object methods. Objector will call like instance methods. It can be defined into one is class method and second one is object methods. So we'll see the syntax, how a class method is defined, how an object method is defined. So how this method is different syntax from C language to Objective C. Here, as I said, we can see in C language we define a method something like this: your return type, method name, and your arguments. Each argument is separated with comma, and your method declaration is ends with semicolon. Here in objects is also common. Every statement is ends with a semicolon. Semicolon is like your statement terminator. If you want to call one C language method, and you can make a call of the implementation using a method name, and if it is this method, if I want to call, I can call this way. This is my method declaration. This is my way of making a call for compilation or making a call for at the time of interpretation. But when it is coming to implementation, you can define declaration part. This I'm saying like the C language implementation will go something like this. So whatever the statement it comes, all statements will be added here. If I say the way of procedure for statements, declaration and your implementation, the way of invocation in C. If the same statement, if I want to go with Objective C, the first part will be declaration. Go with declaration. This is way of implementation. As I said, here the syntax is different from C to the behavior is same. What we call a function in a C language or any other language, either Java or a JavaScript, the same. There is no different behavior here. First, the statement will be your return type. So C language we use a method is having a return type is void, means it belongs to a method without return type, means it won't return any value. The method name, and here an object to see, the syntax will change. If you see the void is placed in braces and it followed and prefixed with either minus or plus. So either minus or plus, because in C language we have a different approach, but in Objective C the method can be a class method, can be a object method, because we have two concepts, one is classes, one is objects. So if you want to define one method as a class level, so that called like a class method. If you want to define a method an object scope, the scopes are independent. The class scope is different and object scope is different. I will tell you what is the basic difference. But class methods and object methods. So if you want to identify a method, whether is it a class method or object method, so in Objective C there are the two minus and plus symbols. These two symbols will use to identify whether is it a class method or object method. If there is a method is prefixed with minus, it is a object method. If there is a method that prefixed with plus, we call as a class method. Class method starts with plus symbol and object method starts with minus symbol. And void returns, it says that the method doesn't return any value. So the void is same meaning in C language. So the void is later is placed in your like open brackets, the same method name. Whereas in arguments in C language, the arguments are placed in double in brackets, like on open brackets. But whereas in object to C, it's different. This is your return data type. It's like your argument data type. This is your argument name. Here we define argument data type and variable name. Is both are side by side. But here we keep the data type in brackets and followed with your variable name if it is for single variable. So later it's get implemented in same way. Here all of your method statements will be placed in between these curly braces. You can do all statements placement and you can do all the calculation which you want to do for this method as like an action. So if you want to call this method invocation, so in C directly you can call a method, and what are the values? They are the two arguments the method is taking. So you can pass the two arguments like side by side with comma separator in same way. But in Objective C, the way of invocation is different because this is a object level and class level methods. If the method is followed with minus symbol, then these are object methods. So you have to give your object name and followed with your method name if the method is having argument, and pass the arguments after the colon. So this is the syntax. We should follow the syntax as it is. Then only the compiler can understand your Objective C.
Hello?
Yeah, better. We can hear you now.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, we can't hear you again. You are muted again.
Hello?
Yeah, hello,
Yes.
Suresh?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
No, okay, I'm not sure.
Now it's good.
So after declaration, so if I want to, this is a method without return type and without arguments. This is a method without return type with argument. Let's define another with return type. The return type is integer data. I'm giving some sum. I want to go with two values. This is my first value 1, and I want to go with two values, so I need to extend my method name. I'm giving another name is like and other. My method is called as like sum and other, like, or else this is my method name, this is my second value. The method name is sum of two values. When I call this method, it's a sum of two values. Is having value 1 is one integer and value 2 is another integer. So this is the way. If the same method I want to define is two arguments, in C language will be like this. If the same method, if I want to define int two values into value 1 into value 2, this is the method in C. The same method is when coming to object to C, it will be like this. Some you can define like when we create another argument, when you extend or add any new argument, your method name needs to be extended. That is the representation in object C. If I want to go with another value, I want to add a third value, sum of two values and more. This we can see my method is, the method name will be sum of two values and more. So here the naming convention is too long in objective C, but if you want to go with a method with multiple arguments, so this is the way. You have to extend your method name for each argument. And like, so if there is a, so this is the method we call it like a with return type with arguments. This is the method without return type without arguments. This is a method without return type with an argument. So we have one more is like uh, with return type without arguments. These are the four method declarations we can see: without return type without arguments, with return type with arguments, with return type without arguments, without return type with argument. These are the four ways of methods. I define four ways of methods. Here this is the syntax. We have to declare like this so that the compiler can understand the Objective-C language. Here we have to define either minus or plus symbol. If it is a minus symbol, the method scope is for objects. Only objects can call these methods. Only objects are having a permission to do the manipulation or execution of these methods. If the method is followed with plus symbol, so now this method is class method. If a method is followed with plus or prefixed with plus, then that is class method. If a method is prefixed with minus, then it's a object method. That is the basic difference and identification between object and class methods. So when I want to call the same method, so this is the way of execution. It should be enclosed in closed brackets and give the based on method scope. If it is object scope, pass your object, specify your method name and pass your arguments. If this is the method, if you want to call with multiple arguments, here you can see that the multiple arguments method, the same method sum of two values. There is a method got extended. This is method value. This method, if the method definition is like this, if you want to call this method, then we have to use this way. Based on the scope, either object or class. Since it is an object method, use object and followed with method name sum, give some value, and of two values, method extension pass another value, method extension pass another value. So your compiler will switch from here to this implementation. It can execute the statements which is there inside of this method. This is the way of method declaration and with and without arguments in Objective-C. Let's see object creation. So object creation, we have two methods in NS object, that is new, and before that we'll use this sum. We'll execute this sum method, copy this header file. I'm executing for initial time from main method. So I want to use this file. So in main.m, first I have to link it. So I'm linking it top. So the sum class is having different methods. Void sum. Now here we can identify the method is object method because the symbol is minus. The method is not returning any values, so it is void, and it is not accepting any arguments, so there is no arguments. You no need to specify void. You can simply avoid it, and it identifies there is no arguments for this method. So now I want to create a object for this sum. Create a sum. Yes. First of all, we need to create an object. Class, you can identify the symbol C, and the Xcode will give you help. Click the escape and it gives you that is there any methods. First of all, I want to create an object. You can use a new. This gives one instance for the class sum. So that instance is referred by the name S. Every object should follow with star asterisk symbol. So it's like it points your memory. So now S is points the memory address which is created with new method. So the new method we use from super class. Either you can use a new method. The new method will do two things. It allocates memory. It initializes the initial values for the object based on the class. Now I want to call that sum. Here I define those two things. Should be class name should be capital S. Let's change to S. Change here as well. Change here as well. Change it here. Now all the places the class name is changed. Change it. Keep the breakpoint and run the application. Just I'm keeping my breakpoint here. Run the app. Now I'm running the application in 6+. Now you can see the status. It's running the Hello World demo on iPhone 6 Plus. As I said, your application initial point is main method. It first visits your main method, and now you can see that what's happening. So what's the memory, disk memory, and what's the network, and what is the thread is created. It creates one single thread for the whole application. That is main thread. Now you can see the thread is in serial. Now you can see here in debug area. So what is happening? Is there any argument? The argc, there is a one argument is received when you run from the Xcode, and it's created one S object. So if you open that, it refers your address of the object, and it gives you that what is the hierarchy. It is a subclass for NS object. What the NS object is having? NS object is having one variable, that is a. It refers your class. And what are the variables which S class is having? So the S is defined two variables. The two variables will be referred by the object S, value 1 and value 2. The sum class is having two variables. Those two variables is referred. When I created new, the new has done two things. It's allocated a memory with this address, and it initialized the values with the initial values. Initial value is 0 and 0 for the integer. For integer, initial value is 0. Now I want to execute the sum method. So the way of execution of a sum. So the way of method calling. Here you can see the new method we are calling with class name. The new method is calling from the class name. You can see the method is followed with plus. When a method is followed with a plus, it is a class method. So this is a class method, so I'm calling with a class name. So it gives my instance. And after that, object is created. Now the sum in a sum class is a instance method. It's nothing but object method. I defined as a object method, so I'm calling with object. It switched, and you can see that now we are passing the values. So value 1 variable is updated with value 10, value 2 variable is updated with value 100. So it's now sum, it's created a sum variable and initialized, and it's calculated the sum. So now you can see your debugging area. So the entire debugging process is done with the LLDB. So this is like low level debugger which we use in Xcode. So this is debugging your application. You can see the all basic information in your debug area. Now we are done with creation of object, and we did the way of execution, the way of calling a method in Objective-C. How to call a class method and how to call a object method. This method is having written. Now you can see this method is defined in C language. Now you can see that the syntax is in C. This syntax is in Objective-C. We are running two. One is C language code and we are running Objective-C code. So the compiler is can run these two languages codes. It supports compiling C language and Objective-C, and it supports your C++ as well. Now this is your iPhone based user interface. We have not done anything related to user interface like Cocoa Touch. Just we worked with one printf and console level application. So now we can see the data I printed in console. So file based processing I used. So this is object we created here, and this is like method we calling from this, and we can see some statement action for the method, and we able to do something. We did one arithmetic operation here. So if you observe here, the value assigning or arithmetic operations are similar how we see in C language. The syntax I used from the C. The printf syntax I used from C. There is nothing special. So whatever the C language is followed with the printf, I use the same. There is the same format which the C language supports. Your data formatter and your variable. The variable names are as per the C rules. So this is the way of execution and creating an object. So I created a structure and created a object and able to do it. So here you can find one method with class name, one method with object name. The basic difference we can see, there is no mandatory to create an object. You can create a methods for class level, we can do with class name. So there is no mandatory to create an object. If I want to go with class name, I can go with class name. So if I want to define, now we can see the errors, 3 errors as of now when I change this method to class level. So these errors, I am doing something with my instance level variables. So these variables are scope in object scope. These variables are not class scope. So I'm getting errors because the class never knows whether object is created or not, or going to be created or not. So object creation is optional. Either we want to create, we can create, but there is no guarantee to identify from the class. So the class methods we define to do some data processing that is common for the entire class. If the class is having 100 objects, so whatever the statements are defined in the class level, so those statements are common and global for all the objects. When something functionality it's related to global level for one class, define a method as a class method. Until unless we don't have a requirement to for the class level, don't define any class methods. Now we can see the ns object is having a new method that is for class level, ns object class level. So it's created a new. With that we are able to create. So we are not creating any object, we are using one class method to create a memory for one object. So now we can see that. So the basic difference here we can observe what is the difference between class and object. If I want to use my superclass method here, I can use my superclass method. For example, I have another method, void display. No arguments, no return type. Now I am using object to C. No, we'll go with C. C printf display method. Now you can call this. This is the way of execution from one method to another method. You can simply do the same way, message calling from one method to another method. So this is a class level method, so I am using class, so there is no error here. You can call a class method from object method, but can we call a object method from class? Some. Now it returns one error. It's not able to detect from the class related to object, so it's not able to identify the relation of a object method from class method. You can call a class method from object method, but you cannot call the object method from class method, since there is no guarantee of creating an object for one class. The object creation you can do in two ways. One way is like to go with new. Allocate the memory and initialize with init method. This creates one object. I am calling object method. Init is a object level method, so alloc is a class level method. So I am creating this, returns one object. I am keeping that object here. So this method is having one return type. It can return one value. So I am using that return value here. So here I need to give one object because init is object method. So I am getting an object from alloc. So alloc will do like memory allocation. So in C language we use malloc. So malloc will do like memory allocation. So the same will be used with alloc to allocate a memory for one object. So here I am allocating. So later I am using initializing the values for initial values for the variables which is there in this class with init. This is a mandatory. When you create an object, if you want to go with alloc init, we can use these two methods to create one object, or else simply you can use new method. I don't want to write this much of lengthy line, so I want to go with simplified way. You can use new. So it's do the same functionality how alloc init works. I want to call this, we can do. This is like I created two variables. These two are real-time instances, real-time entities. We call it like objects. This is like class. If I want to pass arguments. Let's do the sum with sum of two values. Now we created one more method with two arguments. Now you can get the help here. Now you can see that on console we got something. This is displayed method, and I called some class method. Later I'm doing something. Use the same escape, like same %t. We'll do like space backslash and we'll go for new line. Now you can see this is display method, the values, and again let's go for the new line. Later putting some get. Now you can see that two times we call this method. Two objects are doing process of two methods. You have done three methods calculation here. This display method and 110 and 430. They are the sum of the first values. First it's called the sum display, and we can get the sum 680, and later we give it some two values. I am calling this method 150 and 280. It's given the sum. The second one is 100 and 200. It's given a 300 sum, and it did some action. So sum is already having a static values. Before that it's executed a class method. So the class method is, this is the display method. So you can see the different things here. This is the way of executing a method from another method in objective-c.m file and from C to objective-c message calling. So main method is defined in C. So we call this, we created object and we are able to call this. This is the way of object creations, the way of class creation and variable declaration and calling a method.